So I read, and I quote, X-Men is about civil rights. If you didn't get that, you didn't get X-Men. Black Panther is about civil rights. If you didn't get that, you didn't get Black Panther. Captain America literally fought the Nazis. He is the embodiment of fighting the alt-right. If you didn't get that, you didn't get him. The Empire in Star Wars is fascist. The Rebel Alliance is anti-fascist. If you didn't get that, you didn't get Star Wars. And the list goes on. Punisher isn't meant to be a role model for police or armed forces, so much so that the writers of the Punisher made him actively speak out against it in a comic. If you didn't get that, you didn't get him. Deadpool is queer. He is pansexual. It's a fact. If you don't get that, you don't get him. Superman and Supergirl, and a ton of other heroes, might I add, they're immigrants. The stance of those comics is pro-immigration and pro-equality and acceptance. If you don't get that, you don't get Superman or Supergirl or any of these other heroes who come from lost worlds. Stan Lee said racism and bigotry are among the deadliest social ills plaguing the world today. If you are bigoted or racist, you didn't get any of the characters that Stan Lee created. The stories we grew up with all taught us to value other people and cultures and to treasure the differences between us. Only villains were xenophobic or sexist or racist or totalitarian. If you're upset that there's a black Spider-Man or a black Captain America or a female Thor or Ms. Marvel is Muslim, or that Captain Marvel, the newer one, Carol Danvers, was pro-feminism, or that any of the other things right-wing fans say is stealing their childhood, you never got heroes in the first place. Mm-hmm. There are some that feel that the hero industry, I don't want to necessarily say superheroes, but storytelling in relation to any kind of hero, that they pander to lefties, and that they just never got what being a hero really represents. If you consider yourself a fan of these things, but you still think the LGBTQIA plus community is too in your face, or you have a problem with Black Lives Matter, or you want to take the country back from the immigrants, then you're not a fan at all. Geek culture isn't suddenly left wing. It always was. Mm-hmm. And for those, not that I think any of our fans that watch this show are intolerant, but there are some out there who clearly are. And the reason why I did want to talk about this stance is it's no longer a hidden fandom. Like superheroes, it was kid stuff. There were cartoons and there were movies that made money, but now the game is totally different. Superhero movies are the biggest intellectual properties in the world.
Let's take a look at the Avengers.
That's not an opinion.
Saga.
It's a fact. It is well documented that these movies make money. And as a result, the movies that make money influence the rest of the genre and the rest of the stories in the comics and trickle down into video games and television and everything else. And yet there are people who will continue to believe the opposite. And I have to imagine that people who are believing of the opposite have went to go see Avengers Endgame at the very least.
And completely missed the point.
Where you have a wide ensemble of characters to play with in your storytelling pool. And it's amazing how many people are missing the point. It just blows. I mean, I should believe it because this is where the writing comes from, like real world instances. For example, how Captain America came about, fighting tyranny and the Nazis and everything else. Those stories were taken and put on the pages. And yet it feels like we're still fighting the same thing today. It feels like for people who have either read comics or have seen any movie. I mean, let's take out the superhero aspect for a moment. Let's talk about Avatar, 2009's Avatar, with James Cameron directing. That movie was about...
pretty overt.
Almost as if it was the retelling of America.
Fern Gully.
Yes. It's almost like a retelling of Christopher Columbus coming over and taking over America and stealing it from the Native Americans. Almost the same ideology. Everyone went to go see Avatar.
Colonialism.
Did you guys miss the point of that movie too? I mean, were you rooting for the humans?
It's hard to imagine that anyone could, but you know that people still did. That's the one of the biggest things that is going on right now is like this just sort of disconnect where it's like it's hard to put yourself in the feet of a racist or a bigot, because it's just anyone with a logical, compassionate brain, functioning brain, in my mind, is tolerant and accepting and wants to put love out into the world. And it's really hard to understand anything but that.
Right.
Right?
No, absolutely. It's not to say that we are all perfect.
No,
I
no,
think
no,
the stereotype hero, Superman, is meant to be the embodiment of perfection, and none of us can live up to that. And quite frankly, they've reworked Superman's stories well over the decades to make it so that he isn't perfect. But this is just the stereotype that I'm talking about here. None of us are perfect. I think Barny can agree with me on this, that as times are changing, we are doing everything we can to modify information that we already know and update information and maybe unintentional biases that we had kept in the back of our minds just based on media perception and things that we've been fed in school for all of these years. We're trying to adapt with the times, but I don't think we ever came from a place of prejudice or hate in any way intentionally, in a vilifying way. I don't think that at least never came from me. I'm assuming that never came from you, and I'm assuming anyone that watches our show never had that intention either. But while I always want this to be a series where we can escape the world and escape any problems that are out there and come together as, friends and talk about our favorite fandoms, I have to think that superheroes or heroes in general would easily step out into the world right now and do everything they could to help combat the injustices that are taking place.
Yeah, very well.
All across the world, not just in the U.S., but
very well put.
mostly the U.S.
Across the world.
Yeah, I felt that we needed to maybe talk a little more about that. That's all.
Mm-hmm. And we are, as the Knights, we like to consider ourselves a place for fans of anything. One of our descriptions says that, one of our bios, and for, like you say, for the most part, unless a character is supposed to be a villain or an anti-hero of some kind, then most of the lessons that you can learn from those characters and those stories are about tolerance and acceptance.
But even then, with the good villains that are either written on the page or brought on the screen, there are ways that the good ones, you find ways to sympathize with them.
Like the Joker?
Like Joker or Thanos, and it depends on the story, obviously,
True.
but I'm just going based totally on the stereotype, what's written from years ago.
Even Thanos, brought up a very interesting ethical debate, which, obviously he was wrong.
No, of course,
but there's an interesting
he
debate
felt he was right.
He thought he was right.
But it wasn't out of hatred for a specific
it was
race.
It was because he in his wording, he wanted to improve life for the people that were left, and it was randomly, it was a random 50%, so that there was no like, what's the word, it wasn't biased.
Right. No, exactly. It wasn't biased.
Just over here defending Thanos.
Well, to be fair, you could arguably defend the Thanos from Infinity War to the start of Endgame, but you don't defend 2014 Thanos, because that is almost a different villain entirely in a lot of ways. We could go obviously into that, but
yep.
I think to that point, I think Knights can always do more to help with diversity and inclusion, like either as far as the guests that we have on the show, maybe more of the topics that we talk about. I certainly think there's more that we can do here on the show to continue that trend, and I'd like to make that pledge right now, live on the stream, that we should do our best to do more to
be on the right side of history,
to contribute to more
Black
voices and storytellers.
That was something I read recently that's been going around is this post about, you know, people remaining bigoted and racist. It's like they're failing a test. They're failing an open book test, because looking at history and looking at, you know, the furthering of society, it's so clear that, you know, if you're not trying to work together for this new world, you're not on the right side of history.
Right.
And you're failing the test. So figure it out, and figure out where that hatred and negativity is coming from, and quit it.
Do you want to be a good guy? Because a lot of us know what that side means.
Mm-hmm.
It means to respect your fellow man.
Treat others as you want to be treated. The golden rule is what it all boils down to. But, you know, with this current Black Lives Matter movement, it's we are extending a hand to try and address some of the inequalities that are going on, and that's important right now.
Certainly, donations can help to any cause that is a part of the movement. I have gone out of my way to donate to the Black Lives Matter Boston movement. Bail bonds is a good way to donate.
I think a really important thing for most people to consider is just, you know, the people that you are your confidants, like anyone that you talk to on a semi-regular basis, who trusts you and listens to what you say and takes you seriously. And if they are heading down a wrong path with regards to hatred, racism, then, you know, it's your responsibility to mention that to them, and sort of point out where maybe that's not the right path. And I think that is, you know, if everyone makes a commitment to try and address those kind of issues on a ground level, then we might see a lot of change in society.
Yeah,
you know,
there's already some changes in regards to how studios, for example, handle actors who may put up tweets that don't quite age well. For example,
yes.
For obviously for those that know, I follow the Arrowverse heavily, and we've talked about how there's been a change in cast for Batwoman. Ruby Rose isn't coming back, but also Ralph Dibny, Hartley Sawyer, the actor who plays Elongated Man on the show Flash, has been fired this past week due to tweets that date around 2014 that were sexist and racist, that have not aged well at all, and he has been let go of the show. And especially to actors who play superheroes out in the real world, or at least in the TV world, there's kind of no excuse for this type of behavior anymore. If you play a hero, you kind of have to become that hero. Certainly Stephen Amell has adopted that philosophy. Chris Evans has practically become Captain America in real life. Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark, and that character reflects RDJ in a whole lot of ways, in terms of growth, in terms of coming from a bad place and coming to a point of success now, you know, like that's a full circle thing. But just it pays to be a good person. Like, it's the right thing to do. And I feel as if we are preaching to the choir to those who watch our show.
I hope so. So Crossover said,
yes, I didn't get a chance to read his comment.
I'm usually bad with getting political. I'm curious to know your response to this. Do you guys think there is racism exclusively to whites? Does it exist? I say yes. Are you talking about racism against whites? Are you talking about people treating white people with racism, or are you saying a type of racism that only white people perpetuate? Because there's
I would say if there is racism towards white people, I think that comes from somewhere, in terms of European countries looking to take over.
Like people treating white people badly.
Yeah, I think that comes from somewhere. I think that comes from centuries ago.
Is that like a chicken and egg situation?
European countries looking to take over essentially the world, basically.
Yeah.
India, China, certainly coming to take people from
Colonialism.
Africa. Christopher Columbus coming over and taking the land from Native Americans. Yeah, it's there, but that comes from somewhere. That doesn't come from nothing. And I think in the case of where the racism is in the U.S., that comes from just, for those that are racist, natural hate. So it just...
Yeah, and that's not to say that it is right, but
I do believe it's different. It's not.
And I think where it's different is white privilege. You have to take that into account. You can't. Does racism against white people exist? Yes. Should we complain about it or bring it up? No. Because
as a defending point.
Because we have white privilege. We are extremely privileged. And yeah. So it's not like being kicked when you're down, which as it is for black people in this country right now, they are set up to fail, and then they're kicked when they're down. So it's a double whammy. Whereas, racism,
it kind of relates to why all lives matter doesn't work as a phrase.
No, because racism against white people is not
the problem.
Is not a problem right now. It's really not.
It is black people who...
Yeah. And like you said, you did put that very well. Like there's a reason for that, and that ties into like white guilt and etc. So but I'm not going to say yes, we deserve to be treated differently because of our race in a positive or negative way. But I do think that the key is your starting point. You know what I mean? If if you're white and American or British, then you have such a ridiculous head start.
Yep.
On a black person from either of those countries that it's not, it's not funny. That's the wrong phrase to use, but like that's what I mean. Like it's so insane that racism against whites is not a problem.
I think with the movement that's taking place right now,
yeah,
I think it's good that we have finally truly started this conversation where everyone can take part in the conversation, and I think it's now also more important than ever to continue that conversation the same way our favorite comic book writers have continued these conversations for a very long time that have gone under the radar.
Yeah,
because the superhero fandom has not come to dominance until arguably 2008 with Iron Man and The Dark Knight, but that's just one example that I'm throwing out there. So it's still recent that these characters have come to prominence, but they've been telling these stories for decades, and now we're finally catching up to where they are.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we continue the conversation even after this video or after the media coverage is done on the current situation that's going on, at least with George Floyd and Minneapolis and Breonna Taylor.
And I just want to say, like, on a personal level, with black people that I interact with, or even that I'm close with, both of us are close with, who are pushing this Black Lives Matter agenda. I've never felt any hostility. I've never felt any direct hostility towards me or towards white people from those people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't see it. I don't perceive it as that at all. More as a cry for help. More as they're saying, like, they're saying, look at what's happening to us, and is this okay with you? And if it is, why? And we're here to say, no, it's not okay with us. You are our common human beings, and we care for you, and we care for
Absolutely.
your plight, and we want to do whatever we can to make it right.
Which
And
is
it's
why
not
I
going to
look.
be something that happens overnight, or even maybe in our lifetime, unfortunately. But that does not mean we don't stop fighting for it.
Well, exactly, because our heroes, our favorite superheroes, wouldn't stop fighting. What would Captain America do? And I've used him as my moral compass ever since I saw Chris Evans' portrayal in The Winter Soldier, specifically because I thought that was the first time it really hit me hard of what can I do to be heroic. Not necessarily a hero or a savior by any stretch, because it's not what I mean, but what can I do to just really help and contribute towards fighting
Yeah.
against the injustice.
Yeah, not that you can be Captain America, but it's a good thing to think, what would he do?
What would a hero do? They would help. They wouldn't sit on the sidelines. And that's kind of where I've been for a while, and I realized that's not what we should be doing. And that's that. And we very well could continue this conversation in future streams, but I thought this was a really good way to summarize openly where our stance was.
A way to bring it into our
on the show,
into our area of expertise, I guess.
Like, you may have noticed, for those that are watching, that we have not posted much in regards to our social media content, just because we didn't think it was appropriate to try to promote ourselves right now when there's so much else going on.
Hold back on that for the time being, and America's been highlighting a lot of people of color, and
there are voices who deserve to be heard, more so than us right now. That's how I feel. But
for sure.
Yeah.
Including the Yo Daddy Do show, which is now live every Monday on Facebook. If you want to see some of our work in that sort of sphere, we started that up again on Mondays, and we discussed this stuff a lot last Monday, and I'm sure it's going to be a recurring topic.
Yes.
So yeah, look up Yo Daddy Do on Facebook and watch that on Mondays.